Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're wrestling with a book that our sources describe as, well, the most difficult and obscure in the Bible, Revelation.
Right, that one.
We're aiming to really unpack why this final book has felt like such a puzzle box historically, and, how understanding its original context changes pretty much everything.
Yeah, that feeling people get when they start reading Revelation, that sense of uncertainty. It's not just you.
Yeah.
That difficulty is historical. It's not new at all.
Okay.
And it's led to just countless misunderstandings, misinterpretations over the years. So our goal here is really to explore why it was so hard to read, so we can maybe land on a more flexible and hopefully correct perspective.
Okay, so let's get into that historical struggle. I mean, starting with some of the giants of theology, it seems even they kind of avoided it.
Hey, really good.
Martin Luther, for instance, he famously said that for every word in Revelation, there were as many riddles. That's quite a statement.
It is. And then you have John Calvin. Now, this is fascinating. He preached verse by verse through almost the entire Bible.
Right, systematically.
Exactly. But he stopped. Cold. Revelation chapter 4.
Chapter 4. Why? Right there. What was the thinking?
Well, it seemed to boil down to a few things. Calvin was incredibly rigorous about exegesis. That deep dive into the text based strictly on its actual context. He needed clarity.
Okay.
And he also seems to have had this strong theological aversion to the kind of messy, uncritical, apocalyptic readings that were flying around back then. The stuff that sensationalized prophecy.
So his own high standards, his rigorous method meant if the context wasn't absolutely crystal clear, he just wouldn't touch it.
Pretty much. Add to that just an immense workload he was already under. But yeah, the lack of immediate, clear interpretation based solely on the text as he saw it made him pause.
Well, wait, the fact that these brilliant minds hesitated, did that sort of give permission, down the line for others to just ignore it? Seems a bit dangerous.
It absolutely had that effect. The outcome was pretty clear. Many pastors, many theologians, they started treating Revelation as this book that was, quote, not to be interpreted carelessly.
Which sounds responsible, but
often meant it was just ignored altogether. The common thinking became, well, not really knowing Revelation, it doesn't hinder your salvation, so it wasn't a priority.
Okay, so that historical hesitation sets up later problems. Avoidance was one thing, but then it seems like two other major things blocked a correct understanding. Missing context and a faulty method. Let's talk context first. The Old Testament problem.
Right. Revelation is the finale, isn't it? It's the conclusion to the whole biblical story.
Yeah.
But if you skip the first, 80% of the book, the history, the covenants, the prophets of the OT, well, the ending makes almost no sense. It's incomprehensible.
And historically, a lot of believers were sort of taught the OT was done, over with Jesus.
Exactly, that it was largely irrelevant after Jesus' arrival. So without knowing that essential prologue, the visions in Revelation just sound like some weird dimension we could never access.
Okay, so that's the missing context. Then there's the methodology trap. You mentioned rigid reading, specifically dispensational eschatology. What does that actually do to how people read the Bible?
Well, that's the system that tends to mechanically split biblical history into these neat, separate periods or dispensations. And crucially, it often insists on reading all prophecy as strictly literal, like future news reports.
Instead of seeing the symbolic imagery drawn from the past.
Precisely. It creates this very rigid, sort of blueprint mentality, an inflexible perspective. And historically, this kind of thinking led directly, in some cases, to the really problematic heretical idea of date-setting eschatology.
Right, trying to predict exact dates for end times events.
Yeah, and we've seen the kind of chaos that caused in society, how it damaged communities, even led to the destruction of churches and faith.
Okay, let's pivot then. We've talked a lot about why it's been so difficult, but what is Revelation at its core? You mentioned it's fundamentally a letter.
Yes, that's fascinating, isn't it? It was literally a letter sent by God through John to his people who were facing just incredibly cruel Roman persecution at the time.
So we're talking real danger.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Think about the stakes. Social isolation, arrest, torture, being worked to death in mines or quarries. This wasn't abstract theology for them. It was life and death.
Wow. So the original intention wasn't some complex code about the 21st century, but immediate comfort and strength.
Exactly. It was a letter of hope. It was meant to give those suffering believers the courage of faith, a profound reason to keep living as people of heaven, even in hellish circumstances.
Encouraging them to stick to the path of truth, not compromise under pressure.
That's the heart of it.
Okay, so connecting this to the bigger picture then.
Well, the interesting thing for us today is that we have this incredible privilege, right? We can look back and see how so much historical prophecy, especially concerning Christ and the growth of the church, has actually been fulfilled.
So Revelation is actually clearer for us now than it could have been for, say, Luther or Calvin.
In many ways, yes, we have more of the story unfolded. Which really brings us to the key takeaway, I think.
Which is?
The absolute key to correctly understanding any part of the Bible, including Revelation, is knowing the whole story of the Bible historically, from creation right through to the end. If you only study bits and pieces, the conclusion won't make sense.
So it's like reading the last chapter of a novel without reading the rest. The book designed to give immediate hope became an impossible puzzle because people read its profound poetry like a literal future blueprint.
Exactly. The Bible really is a book that, when read correctly, clearly reveals God's true heart.
So the challenge for you, listening, is maybe to make time to read the Bible diligently, correctly, seeing it as that whole unfolding story, not just hunting for information, but seeking that core revelation of God's intent.
Seeking that unified narrative, that's where the clarity lies.